Hello, this is Brendan, and today's drawing video is going to be on perspective. Perspective is something that's, how do you spell it? Perspective. Something that's frequently argued about, and look at what poor handwriting I have considering that I'm supposed to be an artist. But that's something that happened, I guess, because of grammar school. Not my fault. I spent too much time drawing, not enough time writing. Perspective is frequently argued uh, amongst critics and artists alike when when looking at a painting or a drawing or something, and to judge whether or not it's a the painting or drawing incorporates good perspective. And the funny thing about that is it's actually one of the easiest things, in my opinion, to master when it comes to drawing, because there's some very simple and logical rules that you can follow in order to achieve good perspective. But that's not going to be true for, whoops, wrong button. It's not going to be true for all of all of the drawings, and everything that you could possibly draw. Some things are going to be a little, how to say, a little bit more complicated, I guess. Put it simple. What I'm doing here while I'm talking, I'm just drawing like a street, and this is 1 point perspective. There's two very commonly known ways to draw perspective, and they are 1 point perspective and 2 point perspective. Excuse me. And as you can see here, it already looks like we have a street, a road that goes off into nowhere. And all I had to do in order to, to make that was to have the horizon line here. You always start off with a horizon line when you want to have good perspective. And then to have all of the lines go towards this one spot here, and that is the vanishing point. So having a vanishing point in 1 point perspective, you can pretty much, draw about anything. And another thing that becomes important is scale. Let's imagine this is actually a street. Well, let's put a car on it. Just sketch one out. How big would the car be? About that big. If that's true, a person standing over here might be about this big. I have a head here, some arms sticking out, stick figure. So that being the case, the sidewalk would be about, over here. And none of this is very realistic. This is just very, I'm doing something very, very simple to just to make a point of how the 1 point perspective works. So if I were to make a sidewalk, it would also go like this. You think about the part that's closest to you here, all of this up here. You start off with that and just let it taper off into the distance, because things get smaller as they go off into the distance, and a lot of what we tend to draw in life has boxes, like cities, buildings. People just create boxes. It's something we do. Another thing I can do, since we're using software here, is make an actual layer called perspective, where I can put all of my guidelines. Something I frequently do. That way I won't have to erase as much. And I want that to be transparent layer, right? Okay, so for example, here I have a street, and then I have sidewalk on both sides. Now I want to go in and start doing a building or something like this. So I want some guidelines to show me where I should put that building, but I don't want to have to erase all of them later. So I'll put them on this perspective layer here with a little bit less of the opacity, and just bring that down one notch. So now I can go up here to this layer. Well, I already drew that out anyway, but I didn't draw out this line. Okay, and let's say I wanted some windows. A door, if we said a person was about yay high, a door would be about this big. So what if I put a door here like that? I'm making these lines, the vertical lines are going to be perfectly vertical, and the lines that go off into the distance, those are the sides of the objects. Those are going to all go directly straight towards the vanishing point there. So I'm going to make some more lines here, which you might not recognize at first, might not know what they're here for, but in just a minute I'll show you what they're there for. There's going to be guidelines for windows, basically. Now, to make things less confusing, I do want to get rid of this horizon line. We're not going to see that because it's going to be behind the building. And that'll pretty much be true all the way over here. Yep. My last video, I did one just like this. It was also a perspective video where I was just drawing a house. However, I did not go really into detail. I was kind of babbling a lot. I watched the video myself. I do this sometimes. I'm just rambling on about different things, and I didn't really go into the details of how to understand the perspective and what it's doing. So just for demonstration purposes here, I'm going to do this real quick, building on the street, and you'll see how things go off into the distance. Last video shows this too. This is all 1-point perspective. And the reason I think this is argued so much, as you can see, I'm just following simple guidelines here. I make all the perspective lines, they all go off into the vanishing point. Nothing too complicated, right? And then this line, the side that's facing you, such as this side here, it's going to be perfect, horizontal and vertical lines just like this. This will be the side that's facing us. But the side that's going off into the distance will be tapering off like that. So, yeah. Basically, all of the horizontal lines, all of the vertical lines are going to be perfectly vertical. But some of these lines, what would be a horizontal line for this side here, if you're looking at from the front, that one's going to go off towards the horizon because it's on that side there. So now if I take away the perspective guidelines here, you can see we have a pretty fresh a foundation for what would be a simple little building or a house that's on the street. And another thing, so that's just one of the guidelines. Drawing a simple box that has perspective to it, a simple kind of like a house, is just follow those guidelines. Make everything go towards this one point, and that's why it's called 1-point perspective, because it has just one vanishing point. And that will solve. That would give you the ability basically to start off doing all kinds of different drawings, all different types of scenes. But it's not going to give you everything that you need for when you want to do some more complex camera angles and stuff like that. Maybe you're flying in the air, you have spaceships coming and going here and there. So that's why we also have another one called 2-point perspective. I'll show you that in just a second here. Now for the sidewalk, a sidewalk have lines, right? They have things get smaller as they go off into the distance. And so what you do for this is, as you make these lines, that pattern, these things are all actually supposed to be the same exact width. But since they're going off into the distance and things get smaller by our eyes, things don't actually get smaller in the distance, but our eyes tell us that. And that's a very complicated thing to try and understand. Even though people who've drawn perspective for so many years, they think, they take it for granted probably. It's just a matter of fact. But if you stop and think about it, why is that? We have these eyes that see the world in a certain way, and things just get smaller as they go off into the distance. So what you want to do is have these lines get closer and closer to each other as they go off in the distance, the same way that this line here and that line there is getting closer to each other. Also, the distance from this spot to here will also get closer and closer. And I'm just going to go like this because I think you get the point by now. And there you have sort of like a sidewalk look to it, right? If I were to do one more line here, we could go in and draw these lines. So it looks like, the sidewalk actually has some 3D dimension to it. I just go off like this. Do that again over here real quick. You do want to be careful sometimes and make sure that you really hit that point exactly where it depends on how much detail you plan on adding, but just a little bit off the point there can make a huge difference sometimes. Normally I wouldn't worry about it too much because we would never normally have a road that goes off forever like this, I guess, unless you're in a desert. It's kind of weird. You'd normally you'd have an intersection around here, and then you'd have some other buildings blocking the view and all that kind of stuff. So you don't normally go off into the perfect distance like that unless you're looking at an ocean or a desert or something. in which case you don't even have streets and stuff. So for the most part, you don't have to worry about that. Now let's, since we have that, let's take another concept here with something more natural, such as a tree or some people. So what if I were to have a tree right here, or this side of the street here is going to have a whole line of trees, maybe like when you're going through, I don't know where, like some street in Miami or LA. I'm not sure if they do it in LA. I've seen it somewhere in California, but they do it in Miami. I know they have like palm trees just going down the road. But I'm not going to do palm trees. I'll just do some kind of oddball tree. You can draw trees however you want and somehow justify that it looks like a tree, because there's so many different types of trees in the world that any tree you draw must exist, I think. So I'm just going to draw my first tree right here, and then again I'm going to use perspective. Even though it's a natural thing, a natural phenomenon, I still want to have a little bit of sense of perspective here. So I'm saying the base of this tree starts from here, and there's my guideline, and the top of this first tree starts from there, so there's a guideline for that. And then I'm going to follow that guideline to make a whole bunch of trees just going down the way here. And remember, the further we get away, the closer they will be to each other. Okay, so with that as a foundation, I'll draw a tree in here real quick. And so, yeah, some of the topics I was talking about is like why people argue about perspective. One thing I think is a little childish is that everybody is their own critic, and it's easy. Well, I should say everybody's their own best critic. I don't think anybody ever listens to somebody else's critique and says, "Wow, they said that's so great," because everybody just likes to hear their own opinions about things, especially when it comes to things that have a lot of taste involved, such as art and food and things like that. They're very opinionated. And also for this here, I want to see there's one line here, that's where the end of the tree is. That's the right side, and this is the left side here. So I kind of want a line for that so I can judge how wide the tree should be. And I'll turn the opacity down a little because it's getting kind of hard to see. And then I can just do some random tree in here. But yeah, with this, the matters of taste, I decided to make these trees a little bigger, so I won't need this this guideline here, but I will make them closer as you get further away. And also remember that trees, they can be a little taller and shorter. They're not all exactly the same height all the time. But basically you get the idea. Just like that. Yeah. And then so people argue about that stuff, but there are situations where someone might be right and another person wrong. If you don't really understand how to draw the perspective correctly, you can run into some trouble, and you can run into some pretty bad arguments because it's hard to judge who is right and who is wrong sometimes when we're all using our own eyes as the judge, and there's no ultimate person who can tell you who's right and who's wrong. Even if you have a teacher who's been doing it for years and years, I find these teachers can also be incorrect sometimes. Okay, so there we have very crudely, roughly drawn just a bunch of trees that are going off into the distance here on this side of the road, and so on and so forth. You can do so many different things. If I wanted to have, for example, a fence here, I could use these guidelines, which I already have. I could have a fence here, goes off all along into the distance there, and maybe it comes back behind this wall just like that. And what would you do? Well, we'd have to spend a long time doing this, but you get the idea. Let's say this is some kind of fence. It's a wooden fence, and it just tapers off into the distance like that. And I start to do it quicker. Just, doesn't have to be perfect, something like that. And let's say maybe there's some kind of like board right here that's holding it up. And the fence stops about here and goes off that way. Now back here it's going to be smaller, so go off this way into the distance. And that's just very rough, sketchy kind of fence, because I'm not working on a masterpiece here, just trying to show different things you can do. So there you go, you have a street, something that looks like a building, a house, some trees going off there, a fence, all done very quickly. You could actually turn it to a drawing by putting some birds up here, the cloud or something. The sky is never perfectly clear. Well, I guess it is sometimes, but it's rare. So that's one point perspective in a nutshell. I'm going to just hide this layer, make a new one. This will be 2 point. And I don't know why that's filling in. I can reuse the perspective layer here. I'll just delete what I had and hide this layer. Okay. So now with 2 point perspective, things start to get a little bit more complicated, and I'm not sure if this is one of the reasons why people argue, but we're still going to use the horizon. And with the horizon here, we're going to do things a little differently. I'm going to have 2 points. 1 point here, 1 point here. Just a second, I need a sip of water. Okay, and so just with 2 points here, we're going to do basically the same thing. These lines, let me get on the right layer here. This line, the vertical lines, are going to go straight up and down. And let's say this is a corner of a street. So we're looking at it from an angle now. On the last one, let me bring that layer back up just to make an example. Part of the important thing with this one is the front of this building right here. Why am I not drawing on it? Okay, this layer. The front here was facing us. And that's a very important part with the 1 point perspective, is that this part is facing us. And so therefore, what we're seeing is a perfect square looking at us right here, or a perfect rectangle with, you know, horizontal and vertical lines. And the other face of this third dimension, you know, we live in a three-dimensional world, this face of it is the one that's going off into the distance. Now with 2 point perspective, this is where things get a little more complicated, because we're looking at it from an angle, so neither of the faces are staring directly at us. That means the sides of both sides of this cube, if you will, this cube or, you know, rectangular type object, both of these are going to be going off into the distance. So now when I draw a building from this point of view, it's going to look more like this. Okay. If I were to draw a street, let's say this is a street corner here. This one goes off there. And, you know, street corners, I just wanted to, not to be too nitpicky, but they usually have a kind of a round edge to them, like that, right? And so this one will logically go off to that point. I'm not hitting anything directly where it belongs. Just, you know, for demonstration purposes here. In a minute, I'll bring up some of the older drawings that I've done, which are a bit more detailed, so you can see. And with a lot of practice, I'm going to do the same thing I did on the last one. I'm just going to put in some guidelines here for window, and you'll see how that works when I get it in. Get that in place. I do want them to follow a certain line here, right? Okay. Well, these are not at all even. I have 2 big windows and then little ones here. Maybe I should just do that. Yeah, that'll work. Okay. And after doing this, I was just saying, if you've done this like 100 times, you get an idea of how to basically save a little time and energy on some of your guidelines. Where is the best place to put them? If you're doing this on paper, because I'm using software here, and sometimes I wonder if people, they don't want to use software, they want to learn how to draw on paper, then what you do in that case, you would just take a pencil, this is what I used to do, and lightly sketch the guidelines in. When you get them where you like them, then you can go over, you know, with harder lines with a pencil, maybe erase some of the stuff you don't like, and then just go over the finished painting with a pen, or, you know, a colored marker or something like that, and then you can erase all of the pencil lines. So basically it's the same thing as what I'm doing here, but using you know, paper. So let me put some more buildings in here. They're all, now actually let's make them, to make it more interesting, we'll make them different heights and stuff. This one goes off so high that you can't even see it. This one's just a little bit higher, so there'll be a little alley in there, and this one will be a long building. Here we'll put one, it's also slightly higher and very, very long. So I make it all the way down to like here, right? Okay, and let's see what happens. I'm going to draw just some of this in, and then we'll see what happens. There's a point to be made with this. So here is, I'll make these windows the same size and just very, very roughly make them out, sketch them out a little bit, so it won't be perfect. So here's another building. Make the door a little taller on this one, not really important. Here's another one over here, and here's another one here. Now here's the important part. We have both sides of this this first building I have in the middle here, but this one over here and these two over here, I haven't drawn out the other sides yet, and I did that intentionally. What was going to happen on the previous one here, this 1-point perspective, we would draw a perfect square for that other face because it was facing us. But here on the 2-point perspective, if I were to go like that and bring it straight down, or this one, bring it straight over like that, even, I'm not getting the right angle on here. Something just looks wrong all of a sudden, right? It's not really following the guidelines. It looks like there's a warp-shaped kind of building there. It's like falling over or something. What we have to do is stick with these original 2 points that we have here, and I'll draw the guidelines for that, just like this, for this side and that side. So everything starts to intersect itself, and it gets a little confusing. If you're just starting off with this, I can certainly understand how it would be a little confusing, especially as I'm here trying to actually put it into words. It's just not the easiest thing in the world to put into words. But if you can see what I'm doing visually, and that's why I think these videos are a good thing, I think you get the point that there is hope. There's a way to do it, and you just have to have some patience, know where the lines are. And if you're using software like this, obviously it's never a big deal. And I just eyeball it sometimes, like this one right here. I'm not going to nitpick over exactly where it belongs. So here I'll have a super long window. Maybe it's not even a window. Maybe it's a billboard, right? And I'm just eyeballing in the location of the lines. Here's another one. Or maybe like office buildings, sometimes they have these really long windows that just have many panes in them. So it's like, it's a long window. Now remember, here's perspective. Not all doors are exactly the same height, so you can be a little creative with it, but you do want to have an approximate. And since things are getting smaller as they go into the distance, it would be wrong if I were to do something, say like, not consider the fact that this door should be smaller and just make it like super big like that. That looks more like a garage door because it's already twice the size of what this one should be. According to this guideline here, we just want it to go up to about there. There are usually standards. I mean, most doors are about the same height. This one's a little bigger, but I could also just as easily say that there's some billboard up here or something like that. There you have 2-point perspective. Nothing too fancy. It looks like some buildings. And if you had the time, you could do stuff like, draw in all these lines here, show bricks, draw the bricks in here, make it look like a building, something like that. And every one of those lines should follow and meet up with at least one of these, depending on which side you're going. This face over here, all the lines will go towards, this vanishing point. Well, let me do that a little cleaner. If I were to make brick lines here, these would all go over here, and I would use that perspective layer I have to just sketch them out. And over here, this face, all of these lines will go towards this in that direction. And then, however you want to do it, you can add a layer and erase what you don't want, or use a perspective layer like that. Either way is fine. So that's an example of 2-point perspective. And now I'm going to get into something just a little bit more complicated. This is where I kind of push the envelope and show how this is one of my major arguments, is that a lot of people seem to think if you have 1-point perspective and 2-point perspective, you're done studying perspective, and that's all you need. And you know what? It's almost true. You can get so much done. You can achieve so much with these 2 simple rules, but there's times where you just need a little bit more, and that doesn't really do the tricks. So yeah, I'll show you some more about that in just a second. Hold on. Okay, and so to demonstrate this a little bit more clearly, I have some photos here that were taken from different angles in the city. This is actually somewhere in China, so yeah, if it looks a little weird, that's why. What I'm going to do here with this is show you, you know why it keeps doing that? I want transparency. Okay. Um, this is actually, it's almost like a two-point perspective. There's a lot of really good things about this photo right here, which is why I chose it out of all these random photos I have. It's almost as if you can see right here, a lot of these lines all seem to go to this one point. See how the top of this roof almost hits that point. A lot of these buildings here, you know, if you just follow along the line here, they're all kind of like, and you know, this street here, if you follow it, everything's kind of like going to that point there, and you'll find it in a lot of situations. So there's two things that are great about this photo. One is that it shows how one-point perspective is actually a reality. We're seeing this with an actual photo. Another is how it's not true in many cases, simply for the reason that nothing in the world is ever that perfect, right? Notice how this street winds a little bit, right? It has a little bit of a winding road to it. And also notice how this street, the intersection, is not on a perfect horizontal line there. It's going a little bit on an angle. And so when you're trying to capture things like this, anything can happen, anything can go wrong, and it can become very, very complicated. Obviously, if you were to draw this image, it would take a great many hours, and the perspective would be a lot more complex on this than it normally is. Let's look at some of the tops of these other buildings. Along this street, we have a lot of great stuff happening here, like the top of this one, obviously, is going to go right there. This one. These buildings here, and this is a really, you know, interesting thing. Let's remember the horizon, we can see it so clearly, is right here. Okay, I'm even going to draw that in red because it's so important. And it's a little bit on an angle. Again, nothing's ever perfect, so there's all these things to be considered. Now these buildings here, since the top of these buildings is actually above the horizon, we're going to have they're going to go down towards the vanishing point, and that's the normal thing to do. You have to zoom in really close to see. This is the front. Obviously that part's easy to see. If we could see the side of this building a little bit better, it's actually coming down this way, and in fact it will be going down straight towards the vanishing point. So that's another good example. We can't see the sides of a lot of these buildings, which is also interesting because they're tilted. We can see this one because you know, the road winds back this way a little bit, so we get to see the fronts of these buildings. But these ones, they're going back that way, and you don't get to see them as clearly. So yeah, there's so many different things that could happen. One thing that they all these lines seem to agree with, is that the horizon is just going about this way, because a lot of these buildings are, you know, for the most part, facing the same direction. They're all kind of facing the same way. If you go look at the tops of these roofs here, they're all going about the same way. This building is on an angle a little bit. It's actually going that way, but you still get the sensation that it's you know, pulling back towards the that same vanishing point. So if I were to see the side of this one, this building here, the top of it would come down this way. What other lines? And you can see we just get like this star pattern kind of thing. This one's actually going back this way. It's a great thing to make an example out of right here. Where is it going? It's going that way. But we're still getting it. It looks like it's vanishing almost, you know, around where the horizon is. It's actually going up a little bit further, and there could be reason for that, such as, you know, an angle on the roof. It looks like kind of a beat up old factory building or something, so maybe it's not perfectly horizontal with the ground, such as with this one. Obviously there's some distortion. There's also a little bit of distortion in the photo itself. I don't know what kind of angle lens I was using or anything like that, but you can start to get this feeling when you draw these lines out, and I definitely recommend this if you ever get some photos. It's always better when you have your own photos, because you know, you feel like you've been there. You get this feeling where you can just sense all of these lines going in the same direction, and there's a pattern, right? This one, This is pretty much our vanishing point, somewhere around here. Might even be a little bit higher, and it just makes this unified place where everything's going to meet. And then we have a horizon, and we have these lines that go here that taper off into the distance. So you get this feeling of depth in space as you look at it. And of course, I've completely destroyed that photo, but yeah, there it is. If I turn the opacity down here a little, you get a little bit of a sensation. And there is even a little bit of a two-point perspective in here. Let me just erase this one if you want to get technical about it. What did I do? Wrong button. Okay. This one here, you can see the tops of these buildings are going off that way, and this one is tapering off just a little bit. I'm kind of exaggerating it, right? It's going down a little bit this way. And this is going to become one of my main argument points, where my personal philosophy is that you cannot use either one or two-point perspective in all cases, because it just becomes way too difficult. The vanishing point for these are going to be so far off the page that you'd have to make a mile-long piece of paper to actually get to. Let's look at the sides of these here. It's going up kind of that way, and this one here seems to be going that way. And so if I were to go down further, I mean, there's just something odd about it. Right? I think there might be a vanishing point for this one over here. Yeah, that might be about right. That could be possible. But this one here is such a subtle angle, right? It's not perfectly vertical. It's not perfectly horizontal. It's just going like a little bit off this way, right? It's just kind of going down just a little bit that way. And so the vanishing point for this is going to be way off the page. Now we could extend the page because we're using software here, and that's no problem. But what if you're trying to draw on a piece of paper? And I've had people say things like, well, you can get out a string and start tying two strings, tie one string to this point and one to that point, and whatever you have to do, get your line drawn. It's just ridiculous. I mean, I guess if that's how you are, if that's what you want to do, but do you really feel like you're going to accomplish a lot of things in your life if you have to take out all these tools and stuff? How many drawings can you get done like that? There has to be a better way. And so that's a topic that I go into. Here's another one. I thought this one, it's the same location. This one is also a good representation of the two-point perspective. So we look at these lines here. Nothing's ever going to be perfect, but I'm going to try my best to just follow it exactly as it seems to go, right? So I come down a little bit. This one has an angle like that. Angle kind of like that. Let me go further off the page. Yeah. And we'd go down here, right about that way. And again, as promised by our laws of perspective, we're getting, you can feel a pattern there. You can see how this one, I didn't draw this one very well, actually. Oh, I should have done this on another layer. Okay. So this one here, I did a poor job at drawing it. This one should actually be going down this way a little bit, right? And so you get the feeling that, let me just go ahead and do that thing that people say you should do. Let me make the canvas way bigger. And we'll put it at, I don't know, just 6,000 wide. And we'll center that. Okay. Now I need another layer. Yeah, make a fresh layer here. Okay, so if I were to follow these lines, use some red. This line goes off to about there. And now we can see where they intersect. That's going to be one of our vanishing points there for the two-point perspective. Two-point perspective, basically what we're saying is we have more than one vanishing point, we have 2 points. And you usually don't need more than that. Again, going back to my original topic about the meaning of the vanishing point, the way things get smaller, and how things are always based on this box-like world. It doesn't have to be seen that way. If you drew everything as circles or ovals, I guess it would be a totally different way of expressing it. But people just have this tendency to create boxes. Everything we make is always boxy. We have rooms which are square-shaped, and we have a lot less dome-shaped things. It's just easier to manage. So this is what we end up seeing a lot of. If you go to draw nature, you can also use these boxes to help make the guidelines, such as I did with the trees in the previous drawing, from 1 point perspective. You can still do natural things. The waves of the ocean will also get smaller as they go off into the distance, and you can use boxes as a guideline to help show you where there should be. But I'm going to do more here, and I'm going to follow these lines of the buildings religiously, not thinking about what, where I'm not going to try and force them to belong to this perspective, this vanishing point here. See this one? Let me use, it'd be smart if I just use a different color for this one. I'll go with blue. Yeah, so for this building, we'll do blue. And so you can use boxes to do any kind of perspective, but obviously for buildings and cities, it's going to be the best thing to do. And there's other ways of looking at it. Okay, this is another one. See how far off, even though I stretch this, if I follow these lines religiously to this building, that means I go exactly along with those windows right there. These two lines here, this one, and actually 3 lines, these could almost go on like forever and not meet each other. If you have 2 lines going like this, let me get a nice big thick brush here. If I have a line going like this and a line going like this, okay, we can guess they're going to intersect someplace up here. But if the angle is very subtle, you have something like this, and this one's tilting in just a little bit, you could be like a mile up from here. You could go on and on and on for a really long time, and these lines have still not intersected. It's going to take a long time. So when you get that type of angle between 2 lines, that when the intersecting point of 2 lines is a mile away, there's really nothing you can do with, points. You can't just draw lines or points and get away with it. There's nothing you can do. And this is the argument that I bring up, and I personally find it to be a winning argument. Because, well, prove it wrong. What are you going to do? There is something you can do, but not with the simple points. You can't just, draw a couple of dots off the page. You can't just get a string, which I think is funny to begin with. You got to be a bit more creative. There is something you can do, of course, and we'll figure that out. But, yeah, this is not the answer. And so there's 2 great things that I just pointed out with this that to me are very important about perspective. One is, look at the difference between the red lines here for this building and the blue lines for this building. They have completely different vanishing points, because nothing in the world is actually like this, this perfect. This looks very cartoony. Of course, to begin with, I should have also stretched these points out. That would make it look more normal. Whereas in this photo, the points are all off of the page for 2-point perspective. That's actually normal. That's why this, it's a photo, it looks normal, and this does not, because I have these on the page. They should be off the page, and they always are off the page, which is another reason why I think 2-point perspective is, it's, how to say, it's overgeneralized. This might be why people argue so much. They always try and make it sound like it's simple. Just follow these simple rules. But it's not that simple. It's a little complicated. And the other point here that I was getting at is, these all just have different places. Why do they have different places? Because they're all facing different directions. Some of them don't even seem to meet their horizon. So it actually gets really complicated. Simple rules, yes, but how to understand the rules is the most important thing. You have to understand what you're doing. And this is my, I brought this one out as a perfect example of how far do we have to go. Imagine making a perspective point for this. How far off do we have to go? This is looking up at a tall building. And look at this subtle angle we have here, from here to here. It doesn't change much. Like down here, the line is this long. Up here, the line is this long. It's almost the same line. Let me actually cut that out real quick. Let's see what happens. Wait, I should have done all this on a different layer. Just a moment. Okay. Nope. And can I draw? Yes. Okay, good. That one there. This one here. Let's make a line from here to here to judge the distance. And I'll just cut that line, copy it real quick. Then we'll come down here and move the line up to here, right? So you can see that the difference is not, I mean, it is significant, but it's not that much of a difference. This line is inside the two lines. This one just breaks outside of them a little. I think we can actually get, if I expand this canvas, I think we can reasonably find the vanishing point for this one. But it's just, you know, it's kind of ridiculous how far off the page you might have to go. Let me try 6,000, that down there. And we'll make a new layer. Okay. This one here. And it's even hard with this, you know, I have to zoom out really far to even see where I'm at, and then keep in there. Okay, that one wasn't too bad. But imagine if I went down. What if I changed the angle just a little bit more? And how I would do that would be perhaps just a step away from the building, I believe. Yeah, if I went closer to the building and looked up higher, then the point would be closer to us. But if I were to step away, maybe just a half a block, then that point would be, you know, just way off the charts. It would be like I'm almost looking at it from a side view, and that point would be far off. So another thing that's great about this image here is that it shows that perspective is always there on all angles. It's not just looking at it from a side view, you know, with the 1 point or the 2 point perspective where you feel as though, you know, you're looking off into the distance. Sometimes it's also when you're looking up towards the sky. And so you can have perspective happening on all angles, any direction that you're looking in. And that was really well represented with these two images here. The direction that the objects are facing is important, right? The direction of this building and this building, they're not all facing the same exact direction, so that's going to have relevance. And yeah, also the tilts and the angles of things, and the camera angle. In this case, we're looking up at something, so there's going to be a lot of things that can make this simple rule complicated. What if I were to draw a box just floating in the air here, and maybe the box is just, maybe it's representative of like a spaceship or something, and it's just up in some weird, crazy angle like this. Well, that can be true. You know, some people will sit here and argue, they say, oh, that's impossible, that can't exist. But actually, based on all the things we've seen here, this can exist. You can have some just floating box. What if it's like a spaceship or something and it's coming in for landing? The perspective for this will not go towards any vanishing point. So you got to be a little bit creative sometimes. And I think the best way to do it is to look at get a feeling for the angle. Let's do something like this right now. What can I do? I want to hide this layer. Make a new one that's all white. Actually, I'll just set this up, and yeah, I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so this is like hours later. I just got cut off and taken away. So sorry if I lost track of where I am. But yeah, I did look at where I just was, and quite honestly, I'm not even sure exactly what I was about to do. But I do know where I was, and I was, you know, just about to play with, you know, some more perspective. And basically what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to summarize where I was at with all that stuff, because yeah, this video is getting a little bit long, so we got to cut it short. I'm sure nobody wants to sit around listening to some guy talk about perspective for 2 hours. Like 1 hour is kind of enough, and I did cover a lot of the different topics here. So with all that stuff in mind, one thing I wanted to do before I finish this video is, because I just want to get all this stuff summarized into one video so that I don't have to do it again, is to go look at some other images that I did here. Let me get out, these are like digital paintings that I've done over the past year. And so if we go in here, and you can see how I use perspective, and I mean, granted, these are not the best illustrations ever, but they kind of get the point across. With this one, this is a ship, and it's a strange illustration, of course, to begin with. I know I did put it online, show it to people, and a lot of people are like, you know, why is the ship floating? Why doesn't it just park? Why does it need an anchor? Okay, well, that wasn't the point. But just doing something with perspective. Here's a vanishing point here for this ship, which works out pretty good. It's not perfect, but as you can see here, it's on a strange angle. It does take consideration to the horizon, and the reason for that is because it is supposed to be flat. It's supposed to be not flat, how to say, horizontal with the horizon. And so if we were to draw a box around it like this, you can see we get a pretty nice little rectangle right there. Now I can delete these lines. And that's probably how I started it off. I probably started off by drawing a rectangle there and then filling in the ship as such. So you get a nice little rectangle floating in space right there. And in this case, it meets that point in the horizon where actually it should be probably, could even be a little bit lower considering where I have the horizon back here. But this is also like an alien terrain, so you never know. These could be high mountains, and this could be a ditch for all I know. So, yeah, that kind of works out. This, well, the box should actually be over this way a little bit more, but yeah, you get the general idea there. There's kind of, a long shoebox there. And then with this one here, let's see where this ends up. We can use different color for this, make it a bit more clear. This one here, see the lines go off this way. And basically what I was doing is these objects, they do work in a certain kind of harmony where they're both going towards pretty much the same horizon. So if I were to draw the horizon in here in the background, it would be like, let's use a different color, use this blue, and it would be, approximately this area. It doesn't have to be perfect. So there's a horizon back there. And these objects, they tend to get in that general vicinity. That blue line could be a little bit lower, a little bit higher. Let's see, this one went off here, that one down there. Yeah, this one meets about that line. The building is, it's a little off. But, you can't always be perfect. And as I demonstrated with the previous image, you really never know what's going to happen because not everything is perfect in the world. So, what color did I have for this one? But the point is, I'm basically using 1-point perspective for both of these. The reason you can tell is that the front face of the boxes that get created for these are both perfectly horizontal. And let me just erase these lines real quick. Both horizontal and vertical. You can see here this line is going, with a perfect horizon, and this one is going perfectly vertical. Same thing going on here. We have a nice perfect box that comes out right in the front. So it was actually simple 1-point perspective, but for two completely different objects, and I gave them two completely different vanishing points. The important thing in this case was that they both met about the same place in the horizon, and they are both supposed to be horizontal with the ground. They're not supposed to be, tilted up or down or anything like that. So for this scenario, it worked out okay. And that's an important thing for the type of boxy man-made objects. Basically is what it boils down to. If you're doing man-made objects that are supposed to be flat and level with the ground, then that's a rule of thumb. Make them all go to the same horizon point, or at least close to it. You don't want to be going like up here, because that would make the building look like it's on a severe tilt, like it's falling over, like the Tower of Pisa or something. And so yeah, that's just for man-made objects. But now when we get into mountainous things, see, this one here would make no sense at all. This road, even though it's a winding road, you can still get the sense of perspective because it gets smaller as it goes off into the distance. But look at what happens. If we were to judge based on the size here compared to the size here, then you would say that it's kind of going down on an angle like this. It starts off big up here when we're at this area here. Let me use a different color to demonstrate more clearly. When we're in the foreground here, it's about this long. So let's do that over here. It's about this long. And we get the background, it's about that long. So do that here, it's about that long. So according to this perspective, we're saying that it basically goes like this and intersects right here. Now this breaks the rules that we were following previously here, because we're always saying it should go back somewhere about near the horizon. However, the image still looks okay, right? It's not obviously super realistic, it's just a cartoony illustration. But why does it still manage to work out? Because we're giving the sensation here that the ground is sloping downwards, right? It's going on this downward slope, and so you're looking down into the into sort of like a valley. You're looking down into a valley. So because it's going down, you're going to get a stronger perspective working downwards, and the horizon for this particular patch of land is actually going to be right about here. It's going to be there because everything is going on a downward slope. So it all kind of like, yeah, it goes in that one general angle like that. If I were to make a grid out of it, it would basically come out like this. And you see the boxes get bigger as they come towards you. So that sloping and curving thing is another thing that it's an obstacle that has to be overcome. It's something you have to be creative with when you're dealing with perspective. What happens here is the land goes downwards, and then it sort of flattens out back here. So it'll go down, flatten out, down, flatten out. It might even raise up a little because the roots of the tree are bringing it up, and then slope back down and outwards like this. So you get a warped perspective. I'm not sure if that's the correct way to put it, but that's just what I'm calling it here. And then so let's look at this street where we had the one point perspective here on this one. This is obviously a very perfect world, which we rarely ever see. And the land here, in comparison to what we're seeing here, you can obviously make out that this would have to be a perfectly flat land with a perfectly flat street, something that doesn't usually happen. And that's why everything zooms off. So if you want to make a simple cartoony kind of picture, it's even kind of attractive, you can do that, but it's not going to be very realistic. What's normally going to happen is going to have bumps and grooves in the road. And so here, for example, if we were to have a mountainous area, let me go ahead into a regular black pen. And if back here I were to have, let's just say, some mountains, something like that, as I get closer they get bigger, and then I'll have one big mountain here. What would happen with this road, if I were to draw a road here, now our horizon still going to be right about here. We'll have our horizon, or since the mountains are there, maybe it's even lower, right? Depends on where you're looking too. And you can still imagine that the road is coming towards us just like this, as it did with this picture. However, it's going to go up the mountain and then wrap around it and go down deep underneath there and come up the other side like this, and then get smaller as it goes like this. Let me see if I can draw that out. Those are just guidelines. So over on this side, let's imagine it's a very big road. Going to wrap around the mountain. Since the mountain goes down, over to the other side here where we can't see it, then you're going to stop seeing it for a brief point of time, and then it starts again here. And as it goes up, it doesn't have as much of perspective to it. Because remember here, when we're looking down, it has a stronger perspective. It gets smaller faster. That means when the ground is coming up, it has a lesser perspective. It has, it less gradually gets smaller. And then we get to the other side of the mountain again, and it's going to be much smaller because it's already further away. And it goes off like this. So this would be, if you can imagine, a mountainous road. Let me draw the lines here very roughly. It goes around like this. Then over here it gets smaller, and up there smaller like that. Here you could have a tree just to represent the scale, about how big it is. And you get the general idea. And this is also just perspective. There's so many different rules you could study about perspective. Over here, before I get into that, let me see this tree. So he said if this tree is this big here, and you compare the scale from this point to that point, the tree over here, when we get to the top of this one, is going to be smaller. This tree will be about that big. And these are like actually super trees. If the road is this big and there was a car here, it's a very big tree. So now the trees get smaller as they go into the distance. by the time we get back here, they're just like little sticks. I'm not sure if sketching this out so roughly like this, I'm not sure if it's easy to make out, but use your imagination. That's a tree, that's a road, goes off into the distance like that, and the trees get smaller as they go back there until, you just see little sticks popping up there. That's not too bad. Oh yeah, let me pull out one more image to kind of bring that idea, because I have another one that's finished. This is just rough. Hold on just a sec. Okay, here we go. And so in this one, I think, because this is, a little bit more well finished, sometimes I know when I'm doing those sketches, it's not so easy to make out. And I was locked up there for a minute. So here, if I do some guidelines here, you can see even with this natural kind of formation, it goes up here and it stops, and then it starts again over here on the other side of the mountain, because you can't see a part of it. So there's a jump from where it's this long here, and then suddenly it's that long there. In the foreground, let's see right here, it gets to be this long here, and then suddenly it's just this long, because there's the other side of the mountain where you can't see it. And this part is, the visible part here is much further than the last part that you could actually see on the top of the mountain here. So this also has, even though it's winding and bending around, it also has a general sense of perspective. When we get to this particular distance, it should be about that long. At this distance, it should be about this long. Why is it so much smaller here? That has to do with the bend. This, since it's coming down, notice all of this part is all about the same distance. All here, it's all about the same distance. And that's because, imagine if you have a ladder standing right here, it's going to look just like this, right? If the ladder is falling, it's going away from you into the distance, then it'll get smaller as it goes into the distance. But since this road is going, it's upward slope, so you're going to get that ladder effect where it all stays at the same distance. And then when it goes over to the other side and falls down, then it'll start to get smaller faster. So yeah, the angles of things can really complicate things a lot. I hope that's not too confusing. I'm trying to explain it in the best way that I can here. So that's about it for today. I realized about halfway into this video, I thought I would jump into making some more complicated drawings and stuff. But then I realized actually the best thing to do here is just to call this video Understanding Perspective and looking at perspective or just studying it. And then in the next video, I'll go into doing some actual drawings with it. And after that one, then we're gonna, we'll call it a day with all this study stuff I've been doing for the past, few videos. I went over like, humans and characters and how to draw bodies and faces and stuff. And now I've gone over perspective, and you can get an idea of how I draw out my landscapes and stuff like that. And so after the next few episodes, I'll just dive right into making some, making some other stuff like this, something fun. Also adding color and stuff like that. How does that work? I'm not a master of color, still working on it, but yeah, we'll learn some stuff along the way. And hopefully you guys enjoyed watching. If you made it this far in the video, I thank you very much, and please do subscribe if you'd like to see more. I will be making a lot more videos in this year to come, 2014. So look forward to seeing you again. Have a nice day.